how you approach the case, the investigation that you completed, things of that nature, please.
Yeah, I received the case from Thursday. We did assign it to investigator coordinating. And if you could just walk them through what you did and who you interviewed and how all that flowed.
So I got the case, reviewed it, and one of the first things to do, with most cases, obviously, interview the complainant, try to again get as detailed information as I can from her. And in doing so, I found out that this occurred at Wells Fargo Bank parking lot, the 2nd Foster. Actually, it was right near the ATM machine, which I was hopeful would have photos, videos, something, since she was right in front of the ATM. I contacted a Wells Fargo security officer, and I was told we were just outside the limit, which they keep them. He checked, they didn't have any. So that turned out to be a hit. So after that, scheduled the officers for interview. We interviewed them separately, of course, obtained their statements. Found out from them that subsequent, or after they had contact with her, a TriMet officer arrived at the scene to conduct some subsequent business with the appellant here. And that was the extent of it. As far as witnesses go, there were no witnesses that were identified in any report as to observing any part of this incident. As you've heard, the appellant was stopped by our officers after she was identified as being possibly connected to this mailbox rifle. One of the complainant on the case was brought to the scene after officers had contacted the appellant for what's called a show up, and that witness was unable to positively identify the appellant as the person that they saw. There was I found no police report written, no crime report on any crime that the original officer who responded to this call found. Again, if it's somebody runs you through mailboxes called in by a third party, you may not have a victim of a crime, so it's not knowing that any mail was actually stolen. It's more of a search the area kind of deal. See if you can locate something.
Okay. You received some written questions from the committee, and not all of the public has access to these questions. So I'm wondering if you could please go through them. We have the answers, but for the benefit of the public, if you could go through those, we would appreciate it.
So I can get the questions out here. Okay. I'll go one by one. Let's see, one of the questions was if the complainant says something happened and the officer can't remember, then why is the finding exonerated and not proven? Well, that's a question for the fact finder and the deal, part of this deal, so I didn't deal with that part of the question. Another question was to obtain photos of the appellant that are not black and white, and I think you should have copies of those. I provided them color photographs for you. And you noted that one of the photographs was from November 17, 2010, in which there was no associated contact found in GPS or anything. That photograph is a DMV photograph that I used for references, so we had an idea of what the appellant looked like. And the other photograph in the case file is an old photograph from the working photo that we had in our file. So we only had 2 photos of the appellant that were included in the case file.
Is there a way to maybe pass those up to the committee, because I don't have those in mind?
And I would note that the internal affairs file typically has the color file, so whatever process IPRs need to copies of the relevant materials, in the future we can try to provide color copies. I think give the best copies and black and white.
And one of the questions was, there was a note in the appellant's transcript that when she was in the back of the police car, she believed an officer took a photograph of her. At the time, that did not seem unusual to me, since a TriNet officer came after the fact that the first two officers had contact with her and issued her an exclusion from the transit system. And it was my belief at the time that maybe the transit officer took a photograph of her for their files for the exclusion. After getting this question, I contacted the TriNet division to see if there was a photograph on file over there. I spoke with the sergeant, who told me they don't normally keep photographs of people who are excluded from the transit system because there'd be quite a few to keep and record. So he checked with me with the officer who responded that day, the TriNet officer, after the first two officers had contact with her. He remembered the incident, but he said I didn't take a photograph of her either. And there was no photograph of her attached to any kind of report that the officers wrote. So I don't know what that photograph, what she's talking about, when she said photograph was taken. I don't have a record of that. Another question was, more information, info on whether the bag search was within policy or legal standards. Of course, that would be for probably your the actual deal for the fact finder. Address that. Another question, Lieutenant Elmore noted that Officer Rippey, who is a female officer who responded to the initial location where this mailbox rummaging was going on, could have responded to this scene and addressed some search issues with the complainant. But she was the one who took the actual call, and the two officers who contacted the appellant were a ways away from her, so she was dealing with the witness as they were dealing with the appellant. She did come to the scene later with the witness in an effort for the witness to look at the appellant to see yea or nay if that was the person they saw. But she wasn't around to conduct the search of the appellant at the time. Let's see, what else? The complainant, or the appellant, said she was wearing a folded crocheted brown cap. Was the cap light or dark brown? Police suspect said to be wearing a cream-colored beanie. Right, and that's what the officers had noted as a description of the suspect. The appellant in her interview said she was wearing a brown beanie. She also matched, and when I asked the appellant what she was wearing that day, she mentioned she had on this beanie, was wearing a black jacket, I believe, and then was also carrying a black and white backpack. And the suspect in this case was identified as carrying a black backpack. So that answers the next question, what color was the complainant's backpack? And then the discussion about Directive 650, number responsibility, that's again for the fact finder to address at the agency. So other than that, again, another question about photos that I answered. I think that's all of them I have on the sheet that I have.
Are there questions for internal affairs outside of the questions that were written down that committee members have?
I have a question. And I will get beyond exactly what launched, what charges were being investigated. And my question has to do with the whole issue about the cream-colored beanie and male versus female, 5'4" versus 4'10", has to do with, well, was it a reasonable match to begin with? Is that issue one of the issues that were being investigated on the complaint? Or is that something that we as a body are not going to be taking down?
Are you asking me to answer?
Well, I'm asking, can you tell me what the exact charges being investigated were and the basis for those? Like improper search, does that have to do with the stop itself?
Well, the charge being investigated, we had a complainant call in and say that somebody's going through mailboxes. So a lot of times police get calls and you don't have a crime or a charge yet, but they have a suspect description, so they'll go and try to locate a suspect, detain the suspect, to further conduct an investigation. So that's how these officers found somebody who they believe matched the description, based upon the beanie, black backpack, and description of the subject. While another officer contacts a witness to see, what do we have here, what did you see, is this the person? So then once they contact that person, then they try to be further.
I don't mean the charges against the complainant.
Oh, okay.
I mean the investigation of the officers. I mean, we're here for an appeal here. So somebody called in and there's complaint of rudeness, improper search, and excessive force. And my question has to do with, does that initial, whether she matched sufficiently for the stop, does that play into any of the things that were investigated in this case?
I can answer. That was part of the initial package that was sent to IA, but IA declined to investigate the stop, the detention of the complainant, so it's going to be outside of the CRC appeal. Okay.
So there was, however, an opinion offered on whether or not it was an improper search. So I feel like some of the question goes to that. You disagree with that?
So, ask your question again.
So I agree with you that Internal Affairs dismissed and did not investigate the stop and detainment of the appellant. But they did investigate whether or not Officer A and independently Officer B conducted an improper search.
And that's where my
I
question
think
is.
that the justification the officers were giving was that they were worried about officer safety and whether there might be evidence in the backpack. When they were asked those questions, I don't think they talked about much about why they were there in the first place. I mean, that's at least the line of questioning.
But the allegation is certainly there that the officers inappropriately searched the backpack. That's an allegation, that's investigated.
Right. What I'm trying to do is narrow the scope of our inquiry to what we're supposed to be deciding. And if it's not up for us to decide whether or not it was a close enough match or not a close enough match for the initial stop, I want to move that to the side now so we don't spend the next month going over that issue when it's done. Do you understand that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll just kind of try to break it down. So, I mean, in my opinion, based on the definition of the suspect match or lack of a match and all that, that really wasn't investigated. So that's not, and that was part of the findings. That was part of the whole chain of that that's leading to this particular appeal. But questions about whether the officers' search of the complainant or the backpack, whether that was proper, that would be part of this appeal that the CRC has ongoing. So that would be appropriate.
Yes.
Just to follow up on that, I believe it was Lieutenant, but in the finding memo that was written, there was discussion about how the lieutenant thought that brought up issues about the appearance and that sort of thing. So I think in that finding memo, bringing those issues up then makes them part of this discussion.
I mean, what I can tell you is that with the allegations that you have before you, I mean, whether the appellant's appearance matched the call into the police, I mean, that's besides the point.
Well, would it be relevant? That's my question. I don't know the answer to that question. That's what I want to know. Is that question relevant? I think that's what Jamie was starting to go after. Is it relevant to the decision to search the bag? And that may be a legal question that none of us are qualified to even investigate and answer. But is it relevant to that? Well, maybe what we need is a brief from the city attorney.
I don't see how it could not be relevant, because this person, the appellant, would not have been stopped at all if they didn't think she was a suspect or the suspect, and they wouldn't have asked to search her backpack.
Well, I think that's true, and in the real world, that's true, but we don't, our body lives in this little narrow world where we're just supposed to rule on the reasonableness of the decision maker above us, and if that factor was not part of the decision makers, if that wasn't part of this investigation, then is it something that we would consider, or is it something that we would send back for further?
So,
I move to see.
there we go.
When I can see.
I won't. I will second Mr. Bisson's motion. Discussion? Okay, let's take a roll
Public-
call.
Before the vote.
Do you have to look at it?
It's true, I do. Public comment. Yeah, Dan, please.
Thank you. Once again, Dan Hamilton, Portland Cop Watch. I'll get to some procedural stuff at the end of the meeting, but it feels as though one of the things that hasn't been talked about is that the Internal Affairs dismissed out of hand this initial question of whether the stop was proper, and so you can't talk about it, you can't send it back to ask them to investigate it, and that's just a fundamental problem with our entire system. So I'm hoping that there's some way that that question can come up at the appeal hearing if you're not going to send it back now and ask for that to be done. There are several allegations which may or may not have been missed. I didn't read the initial complaint, but it does seem like if officers thought there was a quote Hispanic person, Latino person, and took an African-American woman into custody, there could be an allegation of discriminatory racial profiling of some kind. I don't know why that wasn't looked into. In terms of whether or not it was constitutional, your Directive 315.00 says that members are required to conform to and abide by the rules and regulations of the Bureau, ordinances of the city and county, federal laws, and the laws of all states. Members shall not commit any act or fail to perform any act that constitutes a violation of the rules, regulations, blah, blah, blah. So, in other words, if it was unconstitutional, it would, in fact, be a violation of that policy, which apparently wasn't considered by Internal Affairs or the fact finders. Also feels like we were asking about notes from this officer who wasn't on the scene, and that wasn't important, but interviewing somebody who was an ear witness, who, if they were, let's say, not a sighted person, hopefully that person would have been interviewed if there was somebody who was blind on the scene. So I don't see why wasn't done. So I'm hoping that you would ask for that interview to happen before you vote to go ahead with an appeal. And of course, the city attorney doesn't want to say that an unconstitutional search is necessarily a violation of the policy, because it's their job to defend the city against lawsuit. So this is another example why you need your own attorney, and if there's somewhere you can get that opinion from somebody else, I suggest that's where you look. I think that's all I have for now.
Further public comment? Yes?
Regina Hannon, Portland Cop Watch. One thing that struck me just from reading this brief summary was the area. And allegedly, the mailbox thing was supposed to be over on 77th and Steele. I happen to live in Southeast, so I know some of these streets. The woman, who obviously did not have a car, she wouldn't be waiting for the bus, was clear over on Southeast Foster and Steele. So how far do the police go in order to try to find something that they think possibly matches this? You know, would they go as far as the bus stop at the Ross Island Bridge to see, you know, gee, maybe there's somebody that looks briefly like the suspect?
Anything further, Ms.? No, okay. Further public? Ms. Kerr?
I second Dan's concerns about why the son wasn't contacted and why the field wasn't obtained. It seems the more information you have, the better, especially when these things typically come down to a she said situation. And I share Dan's concern that you're going to ask the city attorney on this issue, and I would hope that you would hear from me on the issue regarding the stop as well at the deal itself.
Okay.
I saw her first, so I'll get back to you, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to concur with Ms. Curtin and but I'd also like to bring up the notion that the independent police review was supposed to be about being independent, and I would like to see more independent review. And my understanding of what internal affairs is supposed to be about is increasing and improving the quality of our professionalism in our staff. So it would seem to me that the more open our discussions are with these appeals to cover all the issues and really settle them, the better off we're going to be. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just had a just brief thing. I've lived in Portland for 20 years. Found my mother after 20 years. I just recently found her after 4 years finding her. I was adopted. And the fact is, the matter is, these officers are protected. There's a code within the officers, and we need to look past this because these officers are backing each other. They're lying. I've read the report. Why was my name brought in a case that was not involved in me, but you didn't want to listen to me? But I was listening. I heard everything. The officers didn't know I was listening to the whole conversation. For not to contact me when I was a witness, I'm a part of the investigation. Why was I not contacted? But you're going to bring up a case that has nothing to do with it. I have an issue with that, and that needs to be stopped. You need to stop bringing up stuff that's irrelevant to this case, and the board needs to address the issue. They're trying to cover up what was initially said while she was stopped. That's all I have to say. It needs to be more transparent, and officers need to be scrutinized for covering up, not following procedures, and they need to be counted on that, man, because I can see faultiness in it. I'm sorry, the police tased me in the throat and almost killed me in front of my mom. I'm not too happy about the city of Portland and how the police have been conducting their business with me. I'm very upset right now, as you can tell in my voice. I'm not happy at all. Something better be done, because I will go to the federal court, whatever I gotta do to get this done, because this pill ain't going nowhere. That's all I had to say. Something better be done.
Thank you, sir. Any further public comment? Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to comment, my name is Nicole Brown, that as a person that's not very versed in code or, I know that you guys are restricted by certain, by many bureaucratic, you have many bureaucratic restrictions, but I just want to say that I just want to second what these folks have said, and for the pretext of the stop, like, I am a Hispanic woman. And if someone were to see me rattling around something and say, okay, well, there's a Hispanic woman outside, to think that they would stop an African-American male, more or less my height, it's just absurd. So I just really wanted to, as a community member that's sitting here listening to this, and to think that that isn't a consideration, it just kind of sounds ridiculous.
Thank you. Further public comment? I think I see someone in the back.
Yeah, hi. My name's Brianna. I was just concerned because there was no mention of the fact that the police were supposed to produce a police report if they had handcuffed anyone. And that is one of the police's policies, and I'm kind of concerned why that wasn't included in the consideration of potential policies the police may have violated.
Do you have a specific policy you're referring to?
Yes. It is policy 13.1010.20. Oh, I'm sorry, 1010.20, sorry.
Further public comment? I'm not seeing anyone. Am I seeing anybody? Okay, so thank you, members of the public, for your input. Is there a discussion to be had on Mr. Bissonet's motion based upon public comment that has been received? Go ahead.
I think that, first, if folks think that additional investigation on certain points should be done, have to be voted down. I do think, on the last point, that 10-10-20, is one of the policies at question, and so I think we can explore those issues if anybody so chooses. I think that I have a personal opinion that we have enough here and and we have the information relevant in the file to have a good and vigorous conversation about all of the allegations and whether or not the findings are reasonable. And so that's the basis for my motion, and I stand by that motion. And so if folks want to vote that down and ask for some additional information, I'm happy to be voted down. But I am of the opinion that we're ready to go and have the discussion at the appeal hearing.
As a note for those interested in an appeal, the appellant, and I'm sure that Mr. Liggins will go over this with the appellant, but the appellant is able to bring material witnesses that she would like to proffer to the appeal, and that's in black and white under our protocol. So even though Internal Affairs didn't believe it was necessary to interview the son, for instance, if mom wanted to call him as a witness, there's nothing under our rules that prevents her from doing that. And I will just warn folks that if that came to pass and new information was learned that was not available to the decision makers in this process, that could set us back to the police considering something they hadn't previously listened to, but that is available in this matter, just as a tip for anyone who's concerned about that. I'm going to bite on the question from a smart woman in the back of the room. Mr. Severe, it does appear that under 10-10-20 under handcuffing, that though it's not defined as physical force, the Bureau policy requires members document each handcuffing in a police report, investigation, custody, or special. I don't recall any police, I recall information being learned that she was handcuffed in this interaction. She wasn't actually arrested. So does that trigger an obligation, as there was a handcuffing, for some sort of special report to be written?
When there's use of force by an officer, at least in this that is special report or police report that is included.
And did you find, you've reviewed all of this file and all of the material contained in it, is there any report written consistent with the policy after there was an admitted handcuffing?
One of the reasons I forwarded it was when we were trying to review this case initially, that there was CAD entries, but there wasn't a police report. That was one of my issues.
So was there a request to consider whether or not 10-10-20 specifically handcuffing had been violated?
We referred it due to the allegations that we cited, but that was one.
I haven't heard, well, you're the one that heard the complaint, and you or IPR prepares these allegations, something we've had many discussions about over the years.
One of the issues when you receive a case like this is like you're not sure what exactly happened. That was one of the main issues with this case. We had this complaint from the city of Portland. The tips are from the city of Portland. We had our conversation with the complainant, and then I was left in this case I struggled with. Probably nothing with the timeline. I just kind of sat at my desk for a really long time to find a mistake because I was really struggling with the findings and my role in this. But I forwarded this case to Internal Affairs for an investigation on basically trying to figure out what exactly occurred.
Yeah. Sure.
Officer, I guess it's Winkle, did write a report. What's that? Okay. Well, the officer,
We
one of
don't
the
have
officers did write a report and did document the handcuffs.
Okay. I'm sorry, I mean, I did review the entire file. I don't have it present in front of me, so I just wanted to make sure that.
But yeah, yes, there is a report.
Okay. So I think that answers the smart woman in the back of the room. All right, so motion on the table. Any further discussion? I mean, I'll just say to people that I hear what you're saying about interview Sun and look at field notebooks. I think Sun can be brought to the appeal and can state whatever the appellant wants if the appellant so chooses. And I've read enough of these reports and enough of those handwritten field notebooks, whatever they call them, to be pretty confident I'm not going to get any additional information I need to make a vote or anything huge that's going to impact this investigation. So while I think it would have been helpful and would have been more thorough, I believe a thorough investigation was done in this case, and I have sufficient information to move forward on an appeal. So I appreciate the public bringing that to our attention and encourage the public to hold us to our duty at all times. But we're going to move forward with the vote now. So the vote is to conduct an appeal hearing in our regularly scheduled next meeting. Is that what it is? In April. Mr. Miggins, does that next meeting work for your appellant?
Yes.
Do you need that date?
Yes. 11?
Third.
Third.
April 3rd.
Third, yeah.
April 3rd.
Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Silver, how do you vote? Mr. Parris? Aye. Mr. Bissonnette? Aye. Mr. Troy votes aye. Mr. Bigham? Aye. Mr. Yarosh?
And I vote no because I don't think we're prepared to understand what significance the initial description and stop had over the subsequent search. And I think we're going to be making decisions on that without understanding how it would affect it legally. I think we need to know that sort of thing.
Okay. So the motion carries 5-1. Yes, I can have that correctly. And we will look forward to an appeal hearing at our next regularly scheduled meeting, April 3rd. And I'm wondering if I have any volunteers from the committee to write our case file somewhere. Mr. Yarosh, I appreciate you stepping up and agreeing to do that for the committee. And who would like to join Mr. Yarosh in that? I'll help you out, Steve. I'll do it this time.
Okay.
Okay. So I know that we have more items on our agenda, but I'm going to go ahead and take a break now in case certain people have only a real interest in the case file review and leave us if they don't want to not be bored with other details. Folks are certainly invited. We're going to take a 10-minute break, and we're going to continue to have a public meeting. You're all welcome to attend. Delightful. Okay, so otherwise, is there a motion?
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Bissonnette.
I make a motion to set, case number 2012 C0187, and appeal number 2013 X0001 for appeal at our next regularly scheduled CRC meeting in April.
Can I ask you to hold that motion for 1 second? Yes, sir. Mr. Bigham, is there anything as an APA, Mr. Miggins, as the APA in this case, is there anything you wanted to contribute to the case file review or any requests or information that you wanted to offer to us or ask for?
Oh, we're okay.
Okay, thank you.